by Asaff. The philosophy crop circles, I believe, are not related to UFOs or humanoid extraterrestrials as is the current popular notion. These beautiful global 3D geometric works of land art placed on Earth's energy lines are articulating ancient high esoteric knowledge. The creators appear most often as white or amber-colored basketball-sized luminous spheres. They are pure metaphysical consciousness from a higher dimension that is concerned about our spiritual evolution at this critical time in human history. The circle formations are created utilizing light, sound and microwave energy, steaming the moisture in the plant stocks, making them pliable and then pressed into shape in a swirled fashion. This is performed in seconds without destroying the cereal crop and occurs in daytime as well as at night. It has been observed at certain times when a crop circle is being formed, there appears a cylindrical ray of clear light projection onto the field. The language the circle makers use, of course, is symbolism. That being a universal picture language that was employed by past highly enlightened cultures from ancient Egyptians to the Mayans. Embodied in these glyphs, among other things, is esoteric, spiritual, astrological and astronomical information transmitted through profound sacred geometry. Mathematics and geometry is the language of the universe as the universe is geometrically ordered. To achieve their purpose, the crop circle creators utilize spiritual language, physics, biology, geometry and math. On an esoteric level, the crop circles with their underlying sacred geometry are transmitting thoughts intended to make us see the oneness of creation in multiplicity. As well, stressing the understanding that the micro and macrocosm are the same, a reflection of one another. Hence the ancient philosophical axiom, as above, so below, is represented by the six-pointed star, two interlocking triangles adopted by the Hebrews and is commonly known as the Star of David. Mirroring each other, the individual being and universal being are in reality one. It would follow that all that exists in the macrocosm of the universe must also exist in the microcosm of the individual body. Thus circle images are able to subtly affect the mental and physical body. Humans' major limitations in discovering the essential unity between the microcosm and macrocosm is that we are accustomed to analyze the world into its separate parts, the result being we lose sight of those parts of interrelationship and their underlying unity. The way to fulfillment is through recognition of our wholeness linking man and the universe. This hence is the broad aim of the crop circle art, achieved through visual, allegorical, metaphoric and archetypal symbols across a broad spiritual spectrum. Crop circles are visualized as receptacles of the highest spiritual essence. Usually it is a complex pure geometric configuration but often composed of basic primal shapes. These shapes are psychological symbols corresponding to inner states of human consciousness. The innate simplicity of composition is identified with spiritual presence. The use of such elementary shapes are not simplistic but represents the highest conception in visual terms, because the projection of the symbol is direct and bold, creating a sense of expansiveness. Like a mandala represents a particular configuration whose power increases in proportion to the abstraction and precision of the diagram, gradually growing away from its center in stages, until its expansion is complete. Often, around the center are concentric circles of figures which take part in this expansion. The concentric architecture defines the volume of the formation and creates a rhythmic, harmonious unity. Among the predominant elementary forms of which crop circles are constituted are the circle, line, triangle, square, hexagon, octagon and many other geometric shapes and patterns. All these forms are juxtaposed, combined, intersected and repeated in various ways to produce the desired objective, awakening and expanding the human consciousness. There is an ancient Hindu metaphor of a spider sitting at the center of its web, issuing and reabsorbing its threads in concentric circles, all held at one point. The spider's threads symmetrically expand into a visible circumference, but they can all be traced back to the central point of the web. Like the spider web, the center of the crop circle is the power point from which the entire diagram expands, utilizing the spiral radiating source of energy that generates all forms. It is to be understood as the divine essence out of which proceeds the polarized world. Symbolically, it's the first drop which spreads, unfolds and expands into the tangible realm of the universe. It represents the cosmic principles which expand to create the infinite universe of matter and spirit. A meeting ground of subject and object, this is exactly the kind of spiritual oneness that the circle artists are projecting while creating a sacred place, a temporary temple where the union of the human with the divine can take place. On a biological level, energy from crop circle formations are modifying plant DNA, altering its magnetic waves. a biophysical action of the highest order. These waves emanating from the DNA resonate with external electromagnetic fields, making them capable of changing and directing Earth's electromagnetic field. As they are imprinted around the globe, crop circles are coding the Earth and creating new microorganisms. This is aiding our planet to heal. The organisms are spread throughout the planet via hydrogen atoms in water. In time the organisms will, presumably like rust to metal, eat away the poisonous garbage with which we have so ignorantly and grossly polluted our planet. Along with that activity, the circle creators are employing abstruse methods causing subtle changes to our DNA genetic structure. This enables programming and informing our psyche through hypercommunication via our DNA wormholes. Powerful genetic biomolecules contain the data for the operation of magnetic wormholes to act as biological communication channels. There is a metaphysical connection between our DNA wormholes and the magnetic wormholes in the universe. DNA in itself acts as an intelligence network which enables hypercommunication, resulting in a profound comprehension of the universe, its creation and our relationship and position within it. This will eventually make way for a new paradigm shift for the humans that are able to absorb and relate to the changes, allowing for the transcendence to a higher consciousness and oneness with Mother Earth, their universe and our divine essence. The circle creators are very ambivalent and I believe hold the key to the spirit door that is now opening. They are concerned about mankind and their prime purpose is to wake us up to the dire consequences of our careless, idiotic behavior with Mother Earth and ourselves. Upon realizing this, we will be able to transcend this absurd world we live in. Whether humanity realizes it or not, we are in the midst of a major change at the end of an astrological cycle of time, the Great Platonic Year precession of the equinoxes. We are slowly moving out of our mundane three-dimensional reality into the higher spiritual realm of the fourth dimension. Those who become aware of this and are able to connect and adapt will be invited to make the shift. I believe that time begins in the numbered years after the end of the Maya long count calendar. 12,212,012. Unlike the UFO phenomena, which for stealthy reasons is limited in hard evidence and thus largely elusive, crop circles are numerous, tangible and accessible. Notwithstanding that the military and governments are perplexed with genuine crop circles, the Western academic scientific community is reluctant to seriously investigate the anomaly. They allow the hoaxes, media and corporations to have fun with it and discredit the serious researchers and their evidence. Without rational, impartial or comprehensive investigation, they write off all the formations as hoaxes. It is enough that over the long history the circle formations appear in life-sustaining crop without damage to the plants. As they destroy the crop and anger the farmers, the hoaxes have become quite good at faking crop circles and confusing the issue. Intuition tells me that some of those impressive-looking formations they fake may have been subliminally planted in their minds by the high spiritual entities. Nonetheless, divine truth will not be denied and it will become apparent as it rises to the top of our consciousness. In a dark, cruel and confused world, the message of the crop circle formations may be humanity's last ray of hope for a positive psychological change. Note, though I have used the reference term crop circles abundantly in this brief as it is the most familiar reference to the phenomena, it is not really appropriate anymore as crop circles have evolved into various intricate patterns, forms and pictograms. As well, they are no longer restricted to just crops. They are being found in snow, ice, desert sand, mountain moss and tree bark. Included in the numerous formations are new geometric theorems, diatonic ratios and many defined images such as insects, birds, dolphins and DNA sequence. As well, celestial images, astronomical alignments and computations, wormholes, pyramids, Mayan, Aztec and Egyptian hieroglyphs, alien faces, Kabbalist symbols, Eastern mandalas, Taoist yin-yang, Celtic cross, a host of various other spiritual, esoteric and ethereal symbols and much, much more. Image copyright by Suzanne Taylor. Crop circles explained the science. The findings of the molecular biologists Dr. P.J.O.T.R.P. Garjajev and Dr. Vladimir Poponin of the Russian Academy of Science concerning the phantom DNA effect have a radical connection with the formation of crop circles in the United Kingdom and throughout the world in recent times. According to these scientists, the DNA is emitting electromagnetic waves that continue to manifest even after the DNA sample has been removed from the experiment, hence the name phantom DNA effect. The genetic genetic procedures being adopted by these scientists have been commented on and explained by Grazina Fozar and Franz Bludorf in their book For Next Day Intelligence, who have put forward the theory that self-radiating balls of light often seen in the sky and mistaken for extraterrestrial visitors are in fact a group consciousness phenomenon brought about by hypercommunication within the DNA. This theory by Fozar and Bludorf can also explain the formation of crop circles, which are also commonly attributed to extraterrestrial visitors. In addition, it will be shown that the precise technology being adopted by the aforesaid scientists in Moscow represents a new energy source previously unknown to mankind, which is capable also of creating crop circles. The sensational discovery of the phantom DNA effect by Drs. Grajajev and Poponin, as described by Fozar and Bludorf, occurred when they were attempting to measure the actual vibration pattern of a DNA sample. They illuminated this specimen DNA with a laser light that produced a typical wave pattern on a screen. However, when they removed the sample, the wave pattern did not completely disappear, there remained on the screen a regular wave pattern as if there was still a material sample of DNA being illuminated. A control experiment demonstrated that this secondary wave pattern must still be coming from the original DNA sample that was removed. The control experiment had no DNA sample placed in the radiation beam and only a random pattern was produced on the screen. This phantom DNA effect is always repeatable when a DNA sample is used. Fozar and Bludorf also describe other findings of this Moscow group, particularly concerning the 90% of human DNA that does not code for protein synthesis, and is therefore considered to be biologically inert. They point out that these days we refer to the DNA quite naturally as a genetic code, and we look upon it as a systematic encoding of information. Yet at present mainstream geneticists remain committed to examining the DNA exclusively through chemical processes instead of bringing in speech and linguistic analysts, which would normally happen when you are attempting to decipher a code. Not so in Moscow, however. Here the genetic code is being examined precisely as an exercise in linguistics. This is the science of the structure and construction of speech. It can be used to explore not only natural speech that has evolved in individual countries and cultures, but it can equally be applied to artificial speech, for example computer programming languages. By examining speech, one ascertains the basic rules of syntax, the creation of words from letters or characters, of semantics, a study of the meaning content of words, and these together make up the foundation for a grammar. By applying this scientific form of linguistic examination to the genetic code, the Moscow group have found that the DNA follows similar grammatical rules as human speech, albeit not the rules of a particular language, in this case for example the Russian language, but at a more fundamental level the DNA does follow the rules that contain the common features for all languages. What they have found is that there is an essential relationship between the structure of the genetic code and all the languages of mankind. For centuries scientists have been speculating on a human proto-language, and it may well be that Pyotr Garjajev and his colleagues in the Moscow group have actually found it. Fozar and Bludorf tell us that we must think of the normal relationship in reverse. The structure of DNA does not correspond to human speech structures, but all human language rather follow the pattern of the genetic code. After all, DNA and the genetic code existed long before the first human uttered the first word, so the human languages that have evolved since the advent of humans must have followed the grand pattern that was already laid out in the structure of the genetic code. Fozar and Bludorf warn us that this is not a question of an orthodox material worldview, according to which the facility of speech is merely a secondary effect of being bodies constructed of proteins that are coded for in some genes. The arrangement of the elementary bases in the DNA itself follows a fixed grammar, an ethereal plan, to which our human language is analogous. That this is not a question of a bodily event is already demonstrated by the following finding of the Moscow group, namely that the analogy between the structure of the DNA and human language is particularly pronounced in the particles of the larger, molecular structure that actually serve no purpose for protein synthesis. Herein lies a revolutionary discovery for the entire field of genetics. Those who are only interested in examining the known genes, and derogatively dismissing the rest of the genome as junk DNA, are possibly missing what is really fundamental. It is truly a paradox, says Fozar and Bludorf, for it is precisely the dumb DNA that is actually speaking. According to Pyotr Garjajev, the majority seek to understand the principles of DNA biocomputers, in which they refer exclusively to the DNA Watson-Crick rules at GC. That is correct, but it is not enough. The DNA chromosomal continuum in living systems has wave attributes that have remained elusive to us, and that are like a computer program for the structure of organisms. The known genetic code is a code for protein synthesis, and nothing more. Living chromosomes, however, function just like solitary holographic computers using the end endogenous DNA laser radiation. Fozar and Bludorf list some of the extraordinary consequences of this new approach to genetics which has been pioneered by the Moscow group. They were able to modulate certain frequency patterns into a laser beam in such a way as to influence the DNA frequency. That is to say, they could influence the genetic information itself. It was not necessary to painstakingly decode the sequences of base pairs in the DNA, and thereby artificially formulate genetic information. Quite simply, these Russian researchers were able to use the words and sentences of human language to change the information in the DNA once they had ascertained the basic structures were synonymous. The Moscow group was able to prove this astounding procedure experimentally. DNA substance in vivo, i.e. living tissue, not in vitro, reacts to the speech-modulated laser light, as well as radio waves, provided the correct frequency is found. They were able to direct the information pattern from one DNA sample onto a different sample, and thus able to affect a transmission of the genetic information. This function can be demonstrated in natural cells in various ways. Garjajev and his colleagues have already succeeded in this manner to reprogram cells with information taken from a different genome. Specifically, they have managed to convert frog embryos into salamander embryos simply by exchanging the information patterns in the respective DNA. They have therefore demonstrated a radical new way of interacting and even communicating with the DNA through voice-modulated laser beams. This has to be seen as a totally new form of energy which has been discovered and harnessed, that opens up virtually unlimited possibilities for the evolution of life not only on Earth but in the universe. Fozar and Bludorf also relate the findings of the Russian physicists Sergei Dmitriev and Vyacheslav Jatlov. These two were commissioned by the Russian military to investigate the many sightings of self-radiating balls of light that appear regularly in Siberia on the border with China. They came to the conclusion that these UFOs were actually caused by vacuum domains where gravitational forces can change into electricity, and vice versa. This theory introduces a sensational new element into the new physics because it opens up the possibility of hypercommunication through stable wormholes into other parts of the universe. The theory, however, has radical implications for the functioning of DNA as well. It is now known that DNA functions as a superconductor at body temperature and is able to store light and information. Fozar and Bludorf have come up with a theory that the DNA itself acts as an intelligence network which enables hypercommunication via these wormholes. Effectively then, these sightings of mysterious balls of light in the Russian sky can be explained as a phenomenon based in group consciousness brought about by hypercommunication through the wormholes in the DNA. In this way they are able to explain the often reported experience of people who have seen them, that the balls of light are in various subtle ways interacting at a psychic level. In order to demonstrate the connection between wormholes in space and wormholes in the DNA, Fozar and Bludorf refer to the theory of the Finnish physicist, Matti Pitkänen, who some years ago formulated a new theory about the construction of the universe, based on an 8-dimensional space geometry. The theory is called TGD, topological geometrical dynamics. In this complex theory, magnetic wormholes play a very significant biological role. In fact, the innovative thrust of his theory is to establish a scientific link between physics and biology. His theory leads to a cosmology of sentient beings. Contained in the DNA is much more than simply the instructions for synthesizing proteins for the construction of living cells. These powerful genetic biomolecules also contain the data for the operation of magnetic wormholes as biological communication channels. Pitkänen has come up with a genuinely new approach of incorporating the mental concepts of consciousness and perception into the new physics. According to Pitkänen, wormhole magnetic fields, which present as spacetime layers, are contained in the normal biological material, and are excellent candidates for a physical explanation of perception. Magnetized wormholes can really be seen as the quintessential living system. Fozar and Bludorf explain that Pitcänen's TGD theory demonstrates the long-suspected connection between gravitation and consciousness, namely, that gravitation and consciousness represent antipoles. It even suggests that gravitation is a fiction, evidenced by the fact that gravitational force can be converted into electricity, i.e. electromagnetic vibrations synonymous with brain waves in vacuum domains. Here is the explanation how self-radiating balls of light can enter into telepathic communication with observers. There is a lot of material on the internet concerning the ability of DNA to react to various vibrations and electromagnetic waves. Much of this material seems to be based on the findings of POP that DNA emits quantum-coherent photons. The Institute of Heart Math at Boulder Creek, Colorado presents published articles concerning the modulation of DNA by heart frequencies. There are theories about DNA resonance actually emitting information as well as acting as antennae. In a particular experiment conducted by Vladimir Poponin, it was found that DNA will cause randomly dispersed light photons in a vacuum to line up in an orderly fashion in alignment with the DNA. In other words, the DNA was having an effect on the light particles that are in its external environment. Other experiments describe how DNA removed by as much as 50 miles from the biological donor will show identical and simultaneous responses to the changes in the emotional state of the donor. There is no lag time whatsoever. In other words, as argued by Fosser and Bludorf, there is a simultaneous hypercommunication within the DNA. It may be reasonably predicted that samples of DNA taken from astronauts traveling in outer space would likewise display this hypercommunication ability. In his book, Secrets in the Fields, Freddie Silver argues that the energy behind crop circles is natural, and that an intelligent source is able to control it to a very high degree. How else can we explain a natural phenomena that selectively avoids houses, towns, gardens, and parks, that produces hundreds of geometrical and philosophically significant shapes of great complexity that interacts with, even reads, the minds of its human observers? According to Fosser and Bludorf, therefore, this natural energy is brought about by hypercommunication via magnetic wormholes in the DNA. The crop circle is a group consciousness phenomenon. Dr. Poponin himself states perhaps the most important finding of these experiments is that they provide an opportunity to study vacuum substructure on strictly scientific and quantitative grounds. This is possible due to the phantom field's intrinsic ability to couple with conventional electromagnetic fields. This surely has to mean that the waves emanating from the DNA are resonating with external electromagnetic fields, which implies as a matter of logic that these waves from the DNA are capable of changing and directing the external electromagnetic fields. Again, to quote Dr. Poponin, this model is suggested as the basis for a more general nonlinear quantum theory which may explain many of the observed subtle energy phenomena and eventually could provide a physical theory of consciousness. The geometrical and philosophically significant shapes of the crop circles can be explained, as pointed out by Fosser and Bludorf, in terms of Jungian archetypes in the collective unconscious. This also of course explains a very essential element of crop circle phenomena, namely that they seem to interact with the psyche of the human observers. Hypercommunication through magnetic wormholes in the DNA could not fail to impact on the psyche of persons observing the formation of these crop circles in a group consciousness experience. Another essential characteristic of crop circles is that they appear to have been formed by some form of electromagnetic energy. According to Professor Charles Thomas, who visited crop circles in Wiltshire and Cornwall in 199,192, the process of crop circle formation in these cases appears to have produced a local magnetic anomaly detectable with a reliable instrument. One could add the comment that the anomaly appears to be linked to the direction in which the stalks are flattened, and that the strength of the anomaly appears to vary with the distance from ground level. There may be a suspicion that the magnetic field is created at the time of the formation and decreases through time. Freddie Silver documents many incidents where all sorts of electrical and mechanical equipment has malfunctioned precisely when taken into a crop circle, and then resumes normal functions as soon as it is removed from the immediate vicinity of the crop circle. The engines of aircraft flying over crop circles have even been known to malfunction. According to the theory of Fosser and Bludorf, these crop circles appear precisely as a result of hypercommunication through magnetized wormholes in the DNA, and this would explain the magnetized anomalies aspect of this phenomenon. The stem of the plants within a crop circle are bent in a manner which cannot be explained by conventional science. Crop circles have appeared in wheat, canola, barley, rye and linseed, as well as many other cultivated crops. With a number of these crops, any attempt to bend the stalk will result in it snapping. However, all plants in a crop circle have the stem permanently bent, and yet apart from that they remain alive and well. As regards the walls of crop circles, this force is capable of incising pictograms containing over 1,000 elements with surgical precision, covering areas of up to 150,000 square feet, and with such unerring accuracy that curtains of wheat 1 stalk wide are sometimes all that separate one circle from another. The perimeter walls resemble the seamless curve of a drum, and where inward curving walls meet inside a design, the central point can be defined down to a single stalk. From this description it is abundantly clear that the force that creates these crop circles has to include precision laser beam technology, the same technology that is being used by the Moscow group in their experiments with DNA vibrations. The floor of crop circles consists of plants that have been flattened, but are otherwise undamaged and unharmed. The flattened plants can be woven into complex spirals and swirls, and there can also be several layers of densely interwoven stalks resembling interrelated wave patterns. Generally, any attempt to pry the interwoven plants apart will destroy them. The flattening process can also exhibit extraordinary selectivity. Different species of plant can be left standing amongst an otherwise flattened crop. The selectivity can even extend to plants of the same type and age which are left standing amidst flattened crop. This again recalls an aspect of these experiments on DNA by the Moscow group, where it is found that the DNA will only respond to vibrations at exactly the right frequency. It is only technology of this sophistication that can explain how some plants can be deliberately spared the flattening process on the floor of a crop circle. Laboratory analysis has revealed the crystalline structure of the flattened plants has actually been changed by some force. Even more significant is the fact that the DNA is considerably different from the plants that have not been flattened. In other words, this force that has flattened the crop had the exact vibrational frequency necessary to modify the information patterns in the DNA. The laboratory analysis also found that the seeds and the germinating process of the affected plants had been changed. Although the plant itself was unharmed, this force had made substantial changes to the plant's natural regenerative processes. It is suggested that this kind of change can only be brought about by tampering with the information patterns in the DNA of the plant. As regards the flattening process itself, the laboratory analysis undertaken by Dr. Levengood concluded that an energy source originating in the microwave region had boiled the water inside the plant's nodes, effectively transforming it into steam, again indicating that electromagnetic waves of a certain frequency are involved. And from the statement by Dr. Poponin above, we know that phantom DNA has the ability to couple with conventional electromagnetic fields. In this way, the force can modify biologically inert matter such as soil and rock as well as boiling water. Freddie Silver reviews the evidence of eyewitnesses to the formation of crop circles, and the most consistent observation seems to be that there appeared a tube of light. Silver himself concludes that it is something like a laser beam, and he quotes observations of the Russian metaphysician P.D. Ouspensky that the ray of light can be transformed into a spiral, into a hollow cylinder where the photons lie close to one another lengthwise with two kinds of thread. Silver concludes, regardless of what we call the energy inside those tubes, it seems to send a code which tells plants what to do and when. This light energy is clearly analogous to the voice-modulated laser beam that the Moscow group is using to modify the information patterns in DNA. Putting aside for one moment the actual source of the energy, it is almost certain the energy that is creating crop circles and the energy that the Moscow group is using to modify DNA is one and the same. There has also been many reports of a very distinctive sound that is heard when crop circles are being formed. Freddie Silver refers to the findings that music can actually cause plants to move towards or away from the source of the sound. It has also been found scientifically that spiritual musical chants resonate with the DNA. Silver refers to references in ancient religious scripts that the Sanskrit language is sacred because it is the language of light, and its characters were considered to be the sounds of light. The geometrical vibrations in language were not only believed capable of harnessing the power of light, but also were capable of actually creating matter. Here again we find exactly the same principles being applied by the Moscow group using voice-modulated laser beams to modify the information patterns in DNA. Sanskrit may be the source language for Indo-European languages, but obviously all language has this ability to resonate with the DNA. Effectively, the researchers in Moscow are talking to the DNA through these laser beams, and the DNA is responding. There is communication. With these crop circles, the DNA is demonstrating to us how sound vibrations contained in beams of laser light can create intricate and intelligent patterns in organic external matter simply by modifying the information patterns in the genome of the plants. It may even come to pass that once the significance of crop circles is known, they will begin to contain even more sophisticated patterns to better enable us to decode the DNA. At the conclusion of his book, Freddie Silver refers to the published channelings of a clairvoyant, Isabel Kingston. In 1989 she had contact with a universal consciousness, called the Watchers. This was before much of the recent upsurge in crop circle activity. Amongst other things, she was told by the Watchers that the energy has been put through crop circles through thought processes. She was also informed that this new source of energy is now being created and certain beings are being prepared to understand the messages being projected at this time. Power is being created through the intellect of the scientist. Knowledge is being awakened. Some scientists are very close to the answer, an energy machine. This energy is only partially linked to magnetism. It is linked to the illusion of time. Rather like thought transference, man will be able to change the molecular structure of things, including himself, within the energy pattern of the circles. We give you this information. Not long after this channeling experience by Isabel Kingston, the crop circle activity started to appear in earnest, and around about the same time the Moscow group of scientists came together to commence their experiments with the DNA using voice-modulated laser beams produced by a Malvern LCPS laser photon correlation spectrum. This laser technology, the energy machine, was literally a new form of energy which has the capacity to change the molecular structure of all things. While they were developing this energy, the divine intelligence in the DNA was creating these crop circles using exactly the same source of energy, as a means of demonstrating to us how the universe was created in the first place, and how it may now be modified and colonized. Notes 1. Grazina Fozar and Franz Bludorf. The Next Day Intelligence Networked Intelligence. Arc and Omega, 2003. 2. Ratmeyer M. F.A. Pop. Natrison 68-1981-572. 3. Glenn Rain. Biological Effects of Scalar Acoustic Energy Modulation of DNA. Columbus, Ohio Proc. U.S. Psychotronics Association, 1998. http www.sara.rayan4. Glenn Rain. Modulation of DNA by Coherent Heart Frequencies. Institute of Heart Math. http www.sara.rayan4. Dr. Vladimir Poponin. The DNA Phantom Effect. Direct measurement of a new field in the vacuum substructure. http www.twm.co.nz. dnaphantom.htm5. Freddie Silver. Secrets in the Fields. Charlottesville, VA. Hampton Roads, 2002. Direct measurement of a new field in the vacuum substructure, by Dr. Vladimir Poponin. Update on DNA Phantom Effect 19302. More info about Peter Garyayev's work, click here. NTRODUCTION. In this contribution I am going to describe some observations and interpretations of a recently discovered anomalous phenomenon which we are calling the DNA Phantom Effect in vitro, or the DNA Phantom for short. We believe this discovery has tremendous significance for the explanation and deeper understandings of the mechanisms underlying subtle energy phenomena, including many of the observed alternative healing phenomena. This data also supports the heart intelligence concept and model developed by Dr. Lou Childra. This new phenomenon, the DNA Phantom Effect, was first observed in Moscow at the Russian Academy of Sciences as a surprise effect during experiments measuring the vibrational modes of DNA in solution using a sophisticated and expensive Malvern laser photon correlation spectrometer LPCS5. These effects were analyzed and interpreted by Garyayev and Poponin. The new feature that makes this discovery distinctly different from many other previously undertaken attempts to measure and identify subtle energy fields is that the field of the DNA phantom has the ability to be coupled to conventional electromagnetic fields of laser radiation, and as a consequence, it can be reliably detected and positively identified using standard optical techniques. Furthermore, it seems very plausible that the DNA phantom effect is an example of subtle energy manifestation in which direct human influence is not involved. These experimental data provide us not only quantitative data concerning the coupling constant between the DNA phantom field and the electromagnetic field of the laser light, but also provides qualitative and quantitative information about the nonlinear dynamics of the phantom DNA fields. Note that both types of data are crucial for the development of a new unified nonlinear quantum field theory, which must include the physical theory of consciousness and should be based on a precise quantitative background. Results. The background leading to the discovery of the DNA phantom and a description of the experimental setup and conditions will be helpful. A block diagram of the laser photon correlation spectrometer used in these experiments is with DNA samples. Several double control measurements are performed. These measurements are performed prior to the DNA being placed in the scattering chamber. When the scattering chamber of the LPCS is void of physical DNA and neither there are any phantom DNA fields present. This typical control plot represents only background random noise counts of the photomultiplier. The intensity of the background noise counts is very small and the distribution of the number of counts per channel is close to random. A typical time autocorrelation function when a physical DNA sample is placed in the scattering chamber, and typically has the shape of an oscillatory and slowly exponentially decaying function. When the DNA is removed from the scattering chamber, one anticipates that the autocorrelation function will be the same as before the DNA was placed in the scattering chamber. Surprisingly and counterintuitively, it turns out that the autocorrelation function measured just after the removal of the DNA from the scattering chamber looks distinctly different from the one obtained before the DNA was placed in the chamber. After duplicating this many times and checking the equipment in every conceivable way, we were forced to accept the working hypothesis that some new field structure is being excited from the physical vacuum. We termed this the DNA phantom in order to emphasize that its origin is related with the physical DNA. We have not yet observed this effect with other substances in the chamber. After the discovery of this effect, we began a more rigorous and continuous study of this phenomena. We have found that, as long as the space in the scattering chamber is not disturbed, we are able to measure this effect for long periods of time. In several cases we have observed it for up to a month. It is important to emphasize that two conditions are necessary in order to observe the DNA phantoms. The first is the presence of the DNA molecule and the second is the exposure of the DNA to weak, coherent laser radiation. This last condition has been shown to work with two different frequencies of laser radiation. Perhaps the most important finding of these experiments is that they provide an opportunity to study the vacuum substructure on strictly scientific and quantitative grounds. This is possible due to the phantom field's intrinsic ability to couple with conventional electromagnetic fields. The value of the coupling constant between the DNA phantom field and the electromagnetic field of the laser radiation can be estimated from the intensity of scattered light. The first preliminary set of experiments carried out in Moscow and Stanford have allowed us to reliably detect the phantom effect. However, more measurements of the light scattering from the DNA phantom fields are necessary for a more precise determination of the value of the EMF-DNA phantom field coupling constant. Theory. It is fortunate that the experimental data provides us with qualitative and quantitative information about the nonlinear dynamical properties of the phantom DNA fields. Namely, these experimental data suggest that localized excitations of DNA phantom fields are long-living and can exist in non-moving and slowly propagating states. This type of behavior is quite different from the behavior demonstrated by other well-known nonlinear localized excitations such as solitons, which are currently considered to be the best explanation of how vibrational energy propagates through DNA. It is a remarkable and striking coincidence that a new class of localized solutions to an harmonic Fermi-Pastelum lattice FPU, nonlinear localized excitations NLE, which have been recently obtained, demonstrate very similar dynamical features to those of the DNA phantom. Nonlinear localized excitations predicted by the FPU model also have unusually long lifetimes. Slowly propagating and long-lived NLE are also predicted by this theory. Note that the FPU model can successfully explain the diversity and main features of the DNA phantom dynamical patterns. This model is suggested as the basis for a more general nonlinear quantum theory which may explain many of the observed subtle energy phenomena and eventually could provide a physical theory of consciousness. According to our current hypothesis, the DNA phantom effect may be interpreted as a manifestation of a new physical vacuum substructure which has been previously overlooked. It appears that this substructure can be excited from the physical vacuum in a range of energies close to zero energy provided certain specific conditions are fulfilled which are specified above. Furthermore, one can suggest that the DNA phantom effect is a specific example of a more general category of electromagnetic phantom effects. This suggests that the electromagnetic phantom effect is a more fundamental phenomenon which can be used to explain other observed phantom effects including the phantom leaf effect and a phantom limb. Dr. Poponen is a quantum physicist who is recognized worldwide as a leading expert in quantum biology, including the nonlinear dynamics of DNA and the interactions of weak electromagnetic fields with biological systems. He is the senior research scientist at the Institute of Biochemical Physics of the Russian Academy of Sciences and is currently working with the Institute of HeartMath in a collaborative research project between IHM and the RAS. He can be contacted at Institute of HeartMath, Research Division, 14700 West Park Avenue, Boulder Creek, California, 95006. Phone 408-338-8700, fax 4,083,381,182. References 1. W. A. Tiller. What is Subtle Energies? Journal of Scientific Exploration. Volume 7, p.29330 1993. 2. G. Rain and Armacrate. Structural changes in water and DNA associated with new physiologically measured states. Journal of Scientific Exploration. Volume 8, 3p.438 1994. 3. D. L. Childra. Self-Empowerment. Boulder Creek Planetary Publications, 1992. 4. S. Patterson. The Hidden Power of the Heart. Boulder Creek Planetary Publications, 1992. 5. P. P. Garyarev, K. V. Grigorev, A. A. Vasilev, V. P. Poponin and V. A. Shiglov. Investigation of the fluctuation dynamics of DNA solutions by laser correlation spectroscopy. Bulletin of the Lebedev Physics Institute, N. 1112 p. 2330-1992. 6. P. P. Garyarev and V. P. Poponin. Vacuum DNA Phantom Effect in Vitro and its Possible Rational Explanation. Nanobiology 1995 in Press. 7. V. P. Poponin. Modeling of NLE Dynamics in One-Dimensional Anharmonic Lattice. Physics Letters A in Press. 8. V. Tater. The Secrets of New Thinking. Progress Publisher, Moscow, 1990, 200 p. Russian, 9. J. K. Chaudhry al. J. Inst. Eng. India, 1979, v. 60, PTL 3, p. 6173.